Welcome to the Educational Leadership Podcast with Principal JL, the place where school leaders recharge, rethink, and remember their purpose. If you're a superintendent, assistant superintendent, a principal, assistant principal, dean of students, teacher leader, or a future administrator, you're in the right place. Here we mix practical strategies with real conversations, a little wit, and a whole lot of purpose. Because leadership isn't about the title on your badge, it's the influence you carry every single day with your teachers, staff, students, and families. Our mission is simple: to inform, inspire, and to help you lead with purpose. To give you tools that actually work, stories that spark reflection, and ideas you can use the minute an episode ends. So grab that caffeinated drink, a notebook, and your growth mindset, and get ready to level up your leadership one episode at a time. Because around here, we don't aim for perfect. We aim to be 1% better every single day. Now let's get to the episode. What does it take to go from a classroom teacher to a transformational school leader, to one of the most influential voices in education today? If you're a principal, aspiring leader, or an educator striving to make a deeper impact, this episode is for you. Today, I'm honored to have Principal Baruti Kafele on the show. He is a transformational educator whose impact on schools spans nearly 4 decades. From being named Teacher of the Year in East Orange, New Jersey, to becoming nationally recognized as a turnaround principal for Newark Tech, Principal Kafele has consistently demonstrated what's possible when leadership is rooted in purpose, belief, and action. His school's rise to national recognition and his own Millikan Educator Award are just a part of a legacy built on excellence. Today, he's one of the most sought-after voices in education, delivering thousands of keynotes, authoring multiple best-selling books, and continuing to pour into leaders across the country. I'm excited to bring you his journey as an educational leader, one we can all learn from. Now let's get to the conversation with Principal Kafele. Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of the Educational Leadership Podcast. Today, I am super excited to have on the show Principal Baruti Kafele. Principal Kafele, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thank you.
All right, Principal Kafele, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to ask you the same question I ask every guest on this show. What inspired you to become an educator?
Yeah, I got to a point in my young life where I felt like it was my calling. And so there was really nothing else I wanted to do. I responded and answered to the call, and here I am years later, now 38 years later, still an educator, but in a different capacity, obviously, but still in those education streets, as they would say.
All right. So as an educator, what did you teach?
I taught fifth grade elementary. And then at some point, our district departmentalized starting in grade 3. So I became a social studies teacher full-time for fifth graders. Sometimes I taught language arts for my homeroom in addition to social studies. And some years I taught math with my homeroom. It depended on what the principal wanted at that time, but social studies all day.
All right. So you know a lot about history then. I would say God bless you for taking on those fifth graders. I could not get into the elementary side. I'm secondary. Lowest I got was 7th grade. I was low enough. 7th grade to 12th grade is kind of my wheelhouse. So thank you for that. And so as a teacher, teaching 5th grade, young minds, history, math, whatever the district needs you to do, what experiences did you have that shaped your leadership through that time?
Yeah, at the core of that question is differentiated instruction. Just individualizing everybody in that classroom, understanding their own individuality. And that, before we were even using the word equity, it allowed me to transition in my leadership to continuing to recognize the individuality of young people as opposed to just looking at a school as a collection of children and a collection of staff. Their individuality mattered. So that came from my role as a fifth grade teacher in East Orange, New Jersey.
Awesome. So you've been teaching for a while. Now, how long did you teach? And then what inspired you to go from being a teacher into administration? Do you have a backstory about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I taught for 7 years. And then I think after about the third year, I knew that there was a principal in me. So I went on and enrolled in graduate school here in Jersey, got my degree in 2 years while teaching full time, and even won Teacher of the Year while working on my master's at the building level, district level, county level, and New Jersey State finalist Teacher of the Year. So I was working hard, but I knew probably around the third or fourth, I knew there was a principal in me. So I pursued it. It was nobody that really steered me in that direction, hinted to me that I was a principal. I just felt it based on what I was doing in the classroom.
So you had some intuition and go, you know what, I think what I'm doing here, I can really help other teachers do some of the same things that I'm doing. So I'm really inspired by that because not everybody gets that calling. For me, it was more of my wife's grandpa, who was a former administrator. And I was perfectly happy being a head football coach, teaching math. I was perfectly content because I made it, right? Yeah. And he started going, you know what, I think you could do more. And I'm yeah, okay. But I really appreciate, the intuitiveness that you had, just knowing hey, there's more that I can give. And so what was your first administrative position?
Assistant principal of a middle school in the same city I keep referencing. That's where I'm from, East Orange, New Jersey. So assistant principal, middle school, grades 6, 7, and 8. And I did that for a year and then became principal of that school. So then, so altogether, 14 years in principal leadership.
So in that first year as assistant principal, what are some things you learned about leadership that helped you into the next step to being building principal?
I learned what was not leadership. Let's put it that way. So I was a full-time disciplinarian, full-time cafeteria supervisor, bus duty, and teacher supply inventory clerk. Those were my main responsibilities, but yet I had about 20 teachers reporting to me every day. So I didn't have the opportunity to be their coach. I didn't have the opportunity to spend time in their classrooms as an instructional leader. So I learned what not to do as an AP. I learned what didn't work. I understand why I was utilized that way because so many APs are utilized that way, and then they become principals, and that's how their principals utilize them as the one that does the roll up the sleeve work. So at some point, as I grew into leadership and understood that culture supersedes everything, let me put emphasis on the culture so that I can be who I need to be and the school can be what it needs to be. So the culture, the climate of the building became a priority so that I could ultimately become that instructional leader that my staff and students really required me to be.
All right. That's awesome. Building principal, and you only assistant principal for 1 year, then you become building a principal. What are some things that you learned as a building principal? Okay, I learned these things as assistant principal. I'm going to apply this as a building principal. And what made you a successful building principal once you applied those things?
Yeah, when I became a building principal, I was starting all over because I learned nothing as an AP, or I knew how to discipline young people. So I literally taught myself how to lead. Obviously I saw other leaders who were effective in the district. I was a reader of a lot of different material as it related to principal leadership, but I was figuring it out as I went along, and particularly relative to the population that I serve. So perhaps, for example, some of what I did may not have been necessary in environments that were different from mine. I was in a highly urban environment, predominantly African American, with a smaller population of Latino students, and a free and reduced lunch population of between 85 and 90%. So my leadership was geared toward the population that I served in terms of the need that they brought into the building every day.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
Awesome. So you're also known as a turnaround principal, particularly in Newark Tech is one of your places that you were principal. So what were the conditions that you walked into? What did you have to do to help turn that school around?
Yeah, a lot of, I guess it's just the way I've worded things in bios and all that kind of thing. So people a lot of times talk about Newark Tech, but the fact of the matter is I was a turnaround principal years before as a middle school principal. And that was because of a primary focus, not only on climate and culture, but also on curriculum and instruction. So in this case, curriculum that spoke to the student population that we serve, but then pedagogy that spoke to how we deliver instruction to that population. So we were doing things that were very different from, say, the next school, because of that emphasis on the population that we served and making sure that we were relevant, in this case, culturally relevant relative to how we delivered instruction, so that youngsters could see themselves within the learning, see themselves within the reading, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So later on, I go to Newark Tech as a high school principal and had never worked in a high school before. So I've got to learn high school. I'm in a low performing school, and we went to work. And a lot of those practices that I engaged as a middle school principal, I just transferred over to Newark Tech as a high school principal and was able to do a lot of the same things because the population was the same. It was just, they were just a few years older, right? But outside that, the challenges, they were all the same.
Yeah. So what are some big things you tackled right away? Was it like the culture piece? Was it the instructional practices? What are some tips you can give people when they work into a school that's like, hey, they have some things we got to fix? What were some of the key things that you think were like the most important at that time?
Yeah, and this is not grad school stuff. This is just me, intuition stuff that I'm going to share with you. I felt if I'm in a low performing school with a dysfunctional culture and all the other trappings of being in urban education, I need to have a voice with the students that I serve, with the staff that I serve. And I noticed just in the work, the travel that I do, the work that I do as a consultant, I run into a large number of school leaders who do not necessarily have a voice with their populations. Now, I'm talking about schools that are low performing, schools that have cultures that are dysfunctional, those schools, right? So I'm saying, well, I'll say to the principal, talk to me about your voice with the students that you serve. Do they hear you, right? But when we talk about voice, then there's a broader question. What is their perception of who you are as a leader, right? What kind of relationship do you have with them? Because as I always say to leaders, and as I would say to myself, students are not going to respect my voice if they don't respect me, right? My voice means nothing if this shell means nothing. So I say, okay, let me position myself in their lives while they're in school that I matter. And once I've positioned myself that I matter, now I can start using my voice, which is simply the verbalization of my mind, right? So now let me talk to them about whatever it is that I feel that they need in order for them to be successful human beings within their lives, whether it be in school, whether it be outside. So now let me tell you what that looks like. That means that there'll be no instruction any day for the 180 days that we're in school before they hear from their leader, right? So every day there will be a message from me. It could be in person in a morning convocation, or it could be over the PA system. It's not going to be all day. It'll be about 3 minutes, unless I got a heck of a lot to say, then we'll stretch it to 5, right? But typically about 3 minutes, I just need to say something to them to keep them locked in that what we're doing it's significantly important to their lives. But again, I have to have credibility for that message to be conveyed. So that was me every morning, but that's just a piece of it. Since you asked the question, let me go a little bit deeper. Every first day of the month, I had what was called the State of the School Principal's Message. We called it the Principal's Meeting. So now I got the whole school in my gymnasium. And because, once again, because of my credibility in their eyes, I've got a school full of kids who are sitting there and you could hear a pin drop on the basketball court because they're locked in. So they're not talking and playing and all that kind of thing. So I'm delivering my message of what I saw the previous month and what I expect moving forward, right? But again, I'm going to say it again, I have to matter, because if I don't matter, my words don't matter. So that was my school-wide meeting. But once and that's about an hour long. Once I dismissed them, now I'm going to keep my freshmen. And now I'm going to have a freshman meeting, because that's going to sound very different from that school-wide meeting. I have my freshmen for an hour. So let's call that September. That's when we start in Jersey. After I dismiss them, now my sophomores will come back. And now we'll have a sophomore meeting, then a junior meeting after lunch, then a senior meeting. And now I'm good for the month, right? And then starting in October, we started all over, right? Because I have kids, and I know that all schools don't have this as a challenge, but I did. I have kids who are damaged on multiple different levels. Some of it is school damage, right? Others is community, neighborhood damage. Some of it's home damage, right? But I got kids who are damaged. So my role, along with staff, because it's not a one-man show or one-woman show, my role is to fix them, right? And a part of that fixing, part of that rectifying is those messages. But then there's another piece to that. I had always groomed whatever year I was in, my senior class to be co-principals with me. So the second day of the month, we're pulling the freshmen out of class for another day and my senior males. And now each of my seniors has a message of not more than 5 minutes, right? So I got my guys in one room and I got my young ladies in another room doing the same thing with women leaders and guest presenters. And so they're getting this constant, steady, daily message. But then the last piece is their teachers. You know, as we took the school and we're shifting the school, shifting the focus, shifting the goals, shifting the strategy, shifting everything, so that now teachers are looking at what we're doing through a different lens as well. And now they have that much more preparation to be an asset to students as well. So my point is this constant communication, because one of the things I didn't say in all this is when we open up the floor, right? So it's a two-way street. They have opportunity to also share. So that way we're being educated, we're being informed. So the communication was critical, and the communication was at the heart and soul of the culture of the building, and hence the turnaround that you spoke of.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, amazing educational leaders. If you're finding value in this podcast, learning new insights, getting inspired, or just nodding along thinking, yep, I needed that, then why keep it to yourself? Share this podcast with a colleague, a fellow school leader, or a teacher that is inspiring into leadership. Send them a link, post about it, or just casually drop, hey, you need this in your life the next time you see them. Let's grow this community of game-changing educators together, because great leadership isn't a solo act, it's a movement. Now, back to the show.
Awesome. Well, that's really, that's a lot to process. And for me, it's like, I'm sitting there thinking like, oh, wow. I was just visualizing you doing that, because I lead a school of about 1,000 students. We have about 250, 260 per class. And I'm like, going, man, I'm going to be pulling a lot of kids. But I really liked the message of the constant communication, understanding the demographics and the population you're working with, because every school is unique. Every school has their barriers, and they have their successes. And I think that's really important. But for you just felt like, hey, you know what? This is something I need to do. They have to have some sort of consistency in their life. They have to have messaging to let them know, hey, I care about you. I want you to be successful. I have expectations, but it's not just coming from me. It's coming from staff, but you're also building student leadership within that whole thing. And so I think that was just really, really great. And thank you for sharing that.
Oh, yeah.
And that whole process, like I would have never thought of that. And I thought that was really, really great stuff.
Yeah, that was important to me. And that's why I write all these books. A lot of that is in some of the books I've written, because it is a lot to take. Yeah.
Yeah. So out of some of the books you've written, what are some of your top ones, would you say, hey, these are some good books to start with if you're thinking about, how do I build expectations and cultures in a school?
Yeah, well, I've written quite a few, but the one I wrote most recently is called What is My Value Instructionally to the Teachers I Supervise. That is, as I say every Saturday morning on my live stream, that is the most important book that I've ever written. And I think it'll probably be the most important book that I ever write, because it's addressing the most important aspect of the work of an administrator, whether it be principal or assistant principal, outside of school safety, right? I put school safety in a separate category because school safety is not the reason that youngsters walk into a building every day. So I have that isolated by itself, and then everything else is over here because youngsters are walking in, if we want to reduce it to its lowest common denominator, to learn. So I therefore asked the question, I said, okay, if they're there to learn, how are we guaranteeing that they are in fact learning, right? Do they have a competent teacher, a teacher who can meet the academic, social, and emotional needs of each of the learners that walk into that classroom every day? So then I looked at, and this is over the years, I looked at the professional learning that a teacher may receive. So it's so many different categories. For example, it could be a conference, could be an academy, it could be an institute, right? It could be conversation with another leader. It could be a book. It could be a journal. It could be a blog. It could be a PLN, Professional Learning Network. It could be a podcast. It could be a live stream. There's so many sources of professional learning. But here's the challenge today. Of everything I just listed and more, not one of those folks, the podcaster, the live streamer, the author, right, the presenter, the keynoter, the breakout session presenter, not one of those folks are going to be in the classroom on Monday morning to inform the teacher of his or her effectiveness in implementing what was learned. Right. So we can say, yeah, that was a great book I read. That was a great podcast. Oh my God. The PLN with all of us on the professional learning network, social media, all that kind of stuff. I say, yeah, it's good. But who's the coach? And the coach is three people: the principal, the assistant principal, the instructional coach. Right. Maybe one could throw in a teacher leader if it works in that building, right? But I want to look at the ones who sign the evaluation in this regard. So that would be the principal and the assistant principal. If it's a smaller school, it doesn't have an assistant principal and the principal. So let's say now that the principal and assistant principal or assistant principals, plural, let's say that they feel so overwhelmed that they say, for example, I feel so overwhelmed that I understand in theory, philosophically, that I should be in classrooms, that I should be talking to teachers before going to their classrooms in a coaching capacity. I should be talking to teachers post-classroom visit in a coaching capacity. But I have so much on my plate that I don't know how to make that happen. So therefore, in that situation, you have teacher who may be in a given school district. They're evaluated twice a year, observed twice a year, and that's the only time that these folks see an administrator, right? And thereby their direct coach. And I say, man, so when we talk about the individuality of students, differentiation of students, and meeting the individual needs of students, well, who's coaching that, right? And in this regard, the answer is nobody. So now this teacher, we go on and based on whatever information that we have, documentation that we have on the teacher, we go on and reward this teacher and say, good job, satisfactory, and give them an increment for next school year. But yet there's a percentage of students in that classroom, probably a large percentage of students in that classroom who were shortchanged. And I'll just add this piece. I always say, I probably say it every day, that a student's long-term success could have implications relative to who my teacher is in any given grade. So who my teacher is in any given grade could have lifelong implications. I could go pre-K, kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, and I got bad teaching. And then in grade 7, just to pull a grade out of the thin air, this teacher says, if I fail, you fail. And if you fail, I fail. And I refuse to fail. And this teacher does everything humanly possible to make this youngster a success story that one year. Well, if that teacher was in fact successful, then everything that teacher poured into that youngster could conceivably stay with that youngster for the rest of his or her life. Right. So therefore, I want to make sure, I want to increase the probability that I've got teachers in that school who all of them, each of them are performing at a high level. And that requires that coaching is happening. Because let me give you this one more example. Think about, let's go to football. So you're a high school, you yourself are a high school principal. So you probably have a football team, correct?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So now there's a big game, big homecoming game, rival game on a Friday night under the lights. And the coach has the team in the locker room, and the team is getting ready. They're putting on their pads, putting on their uniform, and now it's time to go out onto the field. So the coach says, all right, gentlemen, come on in. And you're gonna give them that final talk. I shouldn't say big because it could be low key, it could be rah-rah, it could be low key, or anything in between. So now, once he finishes that message, he says to them, all right, gentlemen, let's get this win. And they respond, let's go. And now they're getting ready to march out onto the field. But the coach, like 2 seconds later, says, ooh, gentlemen, wait, I forgot to tell you something that's very important. Come back. So they're puzzled. What's up, coach? Coach says, gentlemen, I forgot to tell you, if throughout the course of the game, if you need me or any of the assistant coaches, simply come back into the locker room. Tell us what you need. We will respond. And then then you go back out there and implement what we told you. So now that game is being played with no adults, no coaches on the sidelines. If the offense is on the field, the defense is on the sidelines with second and third string players, and then vice versa. I don't have to ask you the question if you've ever seen that before, because you haven't. Nobody has. But if we change genres, let's take it out of the football field now. Let's remove it from the football game and go to school. So now the teacher is the athlete, and the head coach is the principal, and the assistant coaches are the assistant principal. We see this model all over America, where the teacher can go the full game, meaning the full year, without any intervention from the head coach or the assistant coaches, with the exception of 2 formal summative evaluations. That's not going to cut it. That's why I wrote the book, What is My Value, instructionally to the teachers I supervise.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I am right there with you. I agree with everything you said. That's been something I've been working really hard, I would say, over the last 4 years to be better at being in the classroom. What I try to do is I try to schedule time, doing some walkthroughs, providing feedback, letting the teachers know that, I'm here to help you. I'm here to guide you. I'm here to coach you up. I always talk about coaching them up and always giving them growth opportunities. Yeah, we have our little rules and the things we got to do, but if I can get in there, like I try to get in there, I've been trying to average between 5 to 6 times a year for everybody. And that's me, my assistant principals, and myself, to where that's walkthroughs, that's formals, that's, informative. I'm probably in there more than that, but not every time am I writing something down. Some of it's just checking in, seeing how they're doing, if they have any questions on that part. But I'm talking about like documenting 5 to 6 times. I don't know if that's good enough, but I'm trying to get better at it.
It's formative. So it's not formal. When we get summative, that when we're writing evaluations, then it's formal. So there's a different level of documentation.
Yeah. No. So I really think that's, nice thing is I'll have a link to your book in the bottom of the show notes so people can find that. I think that'd be really great for you guys to reach out and get and learn more, because you've done other instructional leadership type books, but I really want to, this one about the value of the principal in that, I think is really powerful, because that is kind of our role. We have to be a coach, and that's my mindset. And that's what I want like people to know. We're here to coach you up. We're not here to we got to help you. If you're not doing things, the way they need to be done, we're going to help guide you to get there. And I'm always trying to push my teachers from being like, hey, quit doing all this direct instruction all the time. It's good in certain places, but how can you have kids apply their knowledge and think outside the box and do some different things? So I really appreciate the work that you are doing with that, and how to mind shift, or the mindset of, I'm just, here to, evaluate you a couple of times a year and that's it. You have to do more than that, or you're not really doing your job well enough. In my book, I think you have to get in the classroom as much as possible. And the nice thing is I have 2 assistant principals, and we split up the duties amongst each other. So we're all doing evaluations, but we're also having conversations with each other. Hey, this person's doing this, and, how can we help them, and things like that. So I think those conversations are important to have when you're trying to help each other get people where they need to be, because always look at, if we take care of the adults will take care of the kids, and the kids will grow that way. So we got to grow the adults so they can grow the students as well. And so that's kind of where my mind shift is, but I really appreciate you sharing that out. So Principal Kafele, we've talked about a lot of things here, but there's people that listen to this show that are thinking about becoming a educational leader. And I know you work with new assistant principals or new principals. You also have a podcast as well. You do every morning on Saturdays. It's live. I'll put a link for that as well. What some advice would you give somebody that's thinking about, I think I want to do, become an administrator? What would be some advice you'd give them as they are pondering that?
Yeah, it's there's a whole lot, and we could talk about that till tomorrow. But in terms of some initial things, look at your own principal or assistant principals through a different lens. Instead of looking at them as your evaluator of record, your supervisor, look at them in terms of them being an extension of graduate school. So just study how they move throughout the school and ask yourself, what would I do differently? So for example, it might be a staff meeting, and you see how your principal or assistant principals conduct themselves and conduct the staff meeting itself. And then you ask yourself, what would I do differently? What would I do the same? What am I in disagreement with in terms of who I'd want to be in their shoes in this meeting, right? Look at who they are as coach and ask yourself, would I be the same? Would this be enough, right? Or are they an example for me? Look at them in terms of the culture of the school. Look at them relative to the systems that may either be in place or are not in place, right? Look at them relative to the programs that are in place in the school, and ask yourself, would these be programs that I would want? Or are there programs that are missing in my school? The school I'm working in right now as a teacher or a counselor, whatever I do, are there programs that are missing that if I was principal, I would make sure that these programs are in place? Are there practices? Are there procedures? Once again, are there systems that are lacking? that I would put in place if I was in this school. So in other words, I say to aspiring leaders all the time, study your principal, study the assistant principals. Look at them not as your boss, but look at them as an extension of graduate school. So graduate school is a lot of it's theory, right? It's textbooks, it's the computer, it's resources, it's all that stuff. Now you got a real life human being in front of you, and use that as an extension. So I've got a whole host of questions that I use with aspiring leaders. I wrote this book called The Aspiring Principal 50. The number 50 is on a lot of books I wrote because it's comprised of 50 self-reflective questions. And I've got this list of questions in that book that I say to an aspiring leader. I say, just ask yourself these questions throughout the time that you are aspiring to become a leader, right? And it'll help you with that transition when you make it, because you've been thinking as a leader all along. It's not that you were aspiring to be a leader and then make the transition. You were thinking as a leader, right? There's two very different thought processes. So thinking as a leader and using your principal and AP as your reference.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
All right, educational leaders, you know how we tell our students feedback makes us better? Well, same goes for this podcast. If you've been getting value from this podcast, please take 60 seconds to leave a quick 5-star review. This review isn't just a pat on the back, although I appreciate it. It helps other leaders find the show, join the conversation, and grow right along with us. More reviews equal more reach equal a stronger community of game-changing educators. So hit that review button, drop a few words, and let's keep making educational leadership better together. Now, back to the show.
Awesome. That's great advice. I know for me, that's kind of what I did is I kind of just sat back and watched the principals that I worked under. And I go, wow, I really kind of like that. Maybe not that, kind of like, and I learned through that. And I had some really great principals to learn from. I also had some really not so great ones to learn from as well. So I think you can always take something and learn something from other people. And I think that's really great advice if you're thinking about getting that leadership. Kind of watch the leaders in front of you. And I actually am doing that now with my district level leaders. I'm like, hey, how are they doing? How's my superintendent handle these situations? How does my cabinet members handle these situations? So I'm watching how they handle things, and I'm learning like, well, maybe if I ever get there, I'm not getting there right now. It's not at the point, but I'm learning like, how can I grow as a leader? What are some things I can take from them as well? So always be out there learning and watching other people. I think that's a really great tool and asset that you can do as well.
Let me add one more piece to that too, which is also critical. You've got to ask yourself, you've got to learn yourself, because see, we know ourselves in terms of what we do. But quite frankly, if someone aspires to become a school leader, if you've never led before, you don't know that aspect of yourself yet, right? You're going to learn that, and you'll particularly learn it when you're on the job. So while you're aspiring, then you've got to look at others who are doing it. In this case, as I said before, the folks in the building. And then you got to ask yourself, based on what you see, have an honest conversation with you and ask yourself, am I built for this? Like, notice how the principal is juggling a lot of things at the same time as best you can, because I know you're in the classroom doing what you do. But when you can, just notice what they do, because you may not really be aware of what's on the plate. Forge relationship with the leadership, principal, AP, and learn from them, and see that it's more than what you see. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that you don't know about. So learn as much as you can. Understand the hours that are required, particularly at the principal level versus the AP level, and ask yourself, am I built for this? Do I have the temperament for this? Physically, can I endure this? Do I have a young family at home? And maybe I can't expend this volume of hours. There's so much to consider relative to making a transition from, say, a teacher counselor to a building leader. when you're a building leader, it's pretty much your life. You have a life outside of this, but a large portion of your life is your school. And if you're one that needs your time, particularly in those earlier years, you need your time away from the school, this may not be for you, because you need to spend time in the school, and that's including weekends. And if you can't physically be in the building weekends, then you need to bring the school home with you, right? But it's no way in the world that you could check out on Friday and then pick back up on Monday. It just doesn't work.
You can't just take 2 days off?
Yeah, doesn't work that way.
No, man. You're just hitting on some things, because no matter what, something comes up and you're getting your phone buzzed on Saturday morning because something happened at the building. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen.
Yeah, but your building's getting flooded. The pipe bursts.
Oh yeah, those things do happen.
So I know you wanted to go to that event on Saturday morning, but your building's flooded. So now that's on your furnace, your boiler is malfunctioning. It's just so many. There was a robbery. There's so many things, right? There's a kid in distress, right, or worse, right? And there's so many things that your plans, that trip you were about to take, that event you were about to go on, your school's in trouble, and we're talking off hours. It could be 2:00 in the morning, like you see, you get that call at 2:00. There's an issue at the school. Guess who got to get up and go to that school? You could call the maintenance man or woman or the security or custodian, but that's not their ship. That's your ship. You got to be there.
Mm-hmm. That works. Nope, you're hitting on all of that. That's really important for people to really understand what they're getting into when you're talking about that principalship and that leadership role. And I'm going to talk about something that we have some teachers that want to become admins. So they're aspiring leaders, and they've been doing like, hey, how can I better position myself? What can I do? What can I learn? And I have a couple of them that have done a really nice job with the school improvement team process and the things, being a part of some of our leadership meetings, really helping me present to the school board on some different things we're trying to do here at Hastings High. And when they start seeing and you start showing them what it's like to sit in this seat, and they start looking at, they're like, oh, wow, we didn't realize this. Yeah. We didn't realize that. Yeah, there's a lot of things you don't see us do that we work in the background. We have to, and I let people know, like, yeah, we're always constantly working in the background that you guys really don't know what's going on those things, because your guys' focus is the classroom. Our focus is like everything else around you. Try to make sure that stays stable so you can do your job. So I think that's really important when you have people in your building that's want to be that leader or take that next step, having them learn some things and giving them some things, delegating some things to them has really been impactful, because they get to see, they kind of get a little taste, and they can kind of determine, is this for me or is it not for me? And I think that's important as well. So let's talk about current principals. I know you work with, principals across the nation. You go keynote speaker, you do your podcasts, you write your books. What would be some advice you would give principals that are out there? What's something that you're saying, this is something that all principals we should be focused on, because it's one of the most important things that we can do for our schools?
Yeah. Where do I start?
You could probably go forever. I know you can, but pick one or two.
Since I talked about culture, since I talked about instructional leadership, let me go in this direction. I'm gonna use another football analogy. I had a curiosity some years ago of how many hours do the head coach and assistant coaches collaborate without the football, without the athletes, without the players, without them present, right? Like, how many hours do they work? Do they come together and plan and strategize without the players being there? And I started doing this research, and it came out to roughly 40 hours without the team, just them. And I said, wow, that is so interesting, because 40 hours is a typical work week for a 9 to 5-er, right? But also you look at the amount of time that a football game is actually being played at the professional level, 60 minutes. That's it. For those that will hear this conversation that don't know football, and you see somebody, a significant other or whomever, watching a game for 3 hours, but the game is not being played for 3 hours. That's halftime, that's pregame, postgame, commercials, timeouts, all this stuff. The only time that the game is being played is when the clock is ticking, and that's 60 minutes. So I said, wow. So they're coming together 40 plus hours for a 60-minute game. I said, that's mind-boggling, because now I transfer it to school like I did with the other analogy. I said, so a period at the secondary level is just a tad under 60 minutes, and a block is more than 60 minutes. And then I have these just ongoing conversations with school leaders where I will ask them, how often does your team come together to plan, to strategize, to debrief, to set new goals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And I get various responses, but there is a prevailing. And the prevailing is typically, I guess we interact about an hour a week. And I said, woo. So for a game, these guys are doing 40. And for this thing called education, we doing an hour, right? And again, 60 minutes, the game, 60 minutes, just a tad over one period in a day. There's a need, therefore, going to your question, that we start thinking about, to what extent are we coming together and are we strategizing on whatever, right? I won't even go into all the specificity because there's so much we could strategize about, but are we coming together and bringing all these minds, depending on how many people on the leadership team, including folks who are not in administration or administrative leadership, but who fit into the team, such as an instructional coach and a teacher leader, maybe a counselor, right? Others who are in quasi leadership roles. How often are we coming together? And then you look at the different places they're all coming from. So let's take, for example, let's hypothetically say that me, this 65-year-old man, was still a principal, right? But I got an AP on my squad. Let's say I got 2 APs on my squad who are fresh out of the classroom. They're in their late 20s, early 30s. Well, you know something? The bottom line is, whether someone my age wants to accept it or not, they know some things that I just don't know. They know some things about the world that I don't know. They know some things about perspective relative to a younger mind that I'm no longer connected to, right? But I know some things through wisdom and experience that they don't know. So now you bring all these different levels of prior experience and background together in a room, and we're learning from one another. But the rhetorical question becomes, what happens when we're not taking advantage of that time? And therefore, we're not coming together as a real team of leaders to break down our day the way a football coaches would break down film. Because you think about it real quick, I won't go too much longer on this. A team plays on Sunday, hypothetically, a Sunday as opposed to a Thursday or a Saturday or a Monday. So the players might have the day off on Monday. They may even have Tuesday off, right? But the coaches who work 7 days a week during the season, they're going to be dissecting, breaking down, and analyzing film all day long on Monday. And they're not going to do it in isolation, like one is in a room by himself, another's in a room by herself, another's in a room by himself. They'll be watching together and putting eyes on this film and analyzing this film as to what worked and what didn't work. And if it did work, how did it work? If it didn't work, why didn't it work? And then us as leaders, so many of us, we're not doing that. And then we wonder why we're not getting the results that we should be getting.
Man, that's a great analogy, and I really appreciate that perspective. Me as a football guy, I really can
Mm,
appreciate that analogy because I was starting to think about when I was a football coach and I was analyzing game film and we were breaking things down. What are some things we did well? What are some things we need to work on? Oh, what's this other team do well? What.
yeah.
But I also went from working with my coaching staff. But if I had another coach that I knew that played them, I might call him and go, "Hey, we're
Yeah.
noticing some things here. Are we off on this? What did you guys notice? Oh yeah, we picked that up too. So
Mhm.
you're right. You're on track. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of ways we can communicate. And I think as a leadership team, and we do leadership meetings, once a week. But maybe that's something we can maybe try to do better is get more. We do a lot of informal talks with each other, so we meet a lot about other things too. But I think there's that consistent like connection to where we're trying to communicate with each other. We're trying to make sure we're on the same page. We're trying to stay consistent with everything that's going on in the building. But yet, how do we come together to help our staff? I think that would be a powerful thing. How do we come together to create strategies so we can help our staff get better and making sure we're staying consistent on that page as well. So I really appreciate that perspective and that advice for principals out there. So,
Absolutely.
man, we've talked a lot about a lot of different things, Principal Kafele, and I really appreciate your time. So, how can people like? What are you up to? Like, what are some things you're doing currently? And then, if people want to reach out and connect with you, how could they do that?
Yeah, I'm still doing this work. I took an early retirement back in 2011 when I was 50 because I had one more goal in life, and that was to do this work as a consultant, as a speaker. And I'll put emphasis on speaker. I just love having a microphone and speaking to an audience. So I wanted to do that, but my audience, I wanted to talk to teachers. I wanted to talk to leaders. And somewhere along the way, I really wanted to spend my time with leaders more than anybody else, even more than talking to young people at this point as I got older. So this is what I do. I continue to write as well, and I do a live stream every Saturday for 310 consecutive Saturdays for 2 hours, where we're just talking leadership every Saturday at the AP and New Principals Academy on YouTube. Again, the AP and New Principals Academy on YouTube. And all the videos, all 310 sessions are there. So you can go there anytime and then getting in touch with me, principalkafele.com. And all my contact information is there. My social media, which is everything is Principal Kafele. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and X, and LinkedIn. Everything's Principal Kafele. On X is obviously one word. So Principal Kafele at Principal Kafele, one word, but everything else is two words. Principal Kafele, right? And then our email is right on the website as well. So just go to principalkafele.com.
All right. And we're going to put that information in the show notes. So it makes it easy for people to click and find you. And I'll put the book down there. I'll put the YouTube channel down there so people can find you real easily. And guys, I've watched his Saturday shows. I haven't been able to watch all 309 or 10 of them that you've done. But I mean, if you think about that, that's about what, 6 years, a little over 6 years.
We have our 6th anniversary coming up the first Saturday in May. We started this during the pandemic, sitting right here in this chair.
There you go. There you go. And I definitely recommend it because he does great work and he has great advice. He brings on a lot of great people to talk about leadership and those things like that. So I appreciate the work you have been doing. Well, Principal Kafele, it's been great. I appreciate you being on the show. Before you go, is there anything you'd like to say before we go for the day?
Yeah, no, just some folks just understand that leadership matters. And if leadership matters, then be the best leader you can possibly be.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Principal Kafele. Have a great evening.
You as well. Thank you.
What a conversation with Principal Kafele. His story is one we can all learn from. One takeaway I have is how we can value our own instructional leadership and coach up our teachers to be their very best. What was your takeaway from this episode? If you would like to share it with me, please connect with me by going down to the text me part of the episode where it's under our show notes. I'd love to hear back from you. If this episode resonates with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And please subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss another impactful episode like this one. Until next time, be the change by being curious and 1% better. thank you for sticking around to the very end of this episode. I hope this podcast brings value to you as an educational leader. I would invite you to share this podcast with other educational leaders, or maybe that inspiring teacher who would like to be an educational leader someday. I would also invite you to subscribe and to follow this podcast so you can get the most recent updated episodes when they drop. I would also love it if you leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars, because that would make this podcast more discoverable to other educators like yourself. You can also follow me on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, Threads, and Substack. All you need to do is look for Principal JO, and boom, there I am. This is where we can continue the conversations from the episodes that you have enjoyed. I am so thankful for you guys for listening. Until next time, always be 1% better.